How were they going to get out of this situation? Sam?
Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we are going to be doing a Read My Shelves of 5-star predictions, particularly YA fantasies. Alright, before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comment what is a YA fantasy that you expect to be 5 stars. Alrighty, so if you're new here, this is another round of Reading My Shelves, which is basically just an excuse of trying to find some sort of a theme to connect a bunch of books off of my own TBR to make me actually work this baby down. As I said at the beginning, we're going to be doing 5-star predictions, particularly those that are YA fantasies. This worked out really perfectly because I did a 5-star predictions 2 years ago now, I think. I'm really bad about actually reading the books on those lists. And the 3 I had left were all YA fantasies. So I realized this is kind of a perfect way to connect all of them and then do a Read My Shelves, officially finished out this list, and probably get rid of 5-star prediction lists in general. I'm finally gonna read these 3 books and we're finally gonna find out whether or not they're actually 5 stars. So these are the 3 books we were gonna be reading, starting out with The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska. Josh actually got this for me, God, I think it was for like Valentine's Day a few years prior, and it was a blind book package. I don't have the tag in here anymore, I put it in my journal, but I believe it said something along the lines of every year a man is sacrificed to the witch queen, her brother is chosen, but she volunteers in his place. Then it had a sapphic romance, and so I was very excited. That's all I really knew going into it, and then also seeing this stunning cover and these beautifully detailed black pages. That's about what I got for you. Honestly, I don't want to know too much more going into this one, but I'm hoping I will love it. I did see from a few reviews I looked at that apparently the writing was supposed to be pretty lyrical and lush, which is definitely my style of writing. I do enjoy purple prose. Hopeful that this will actually be 5 stars. Then I am going to be reading Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. I bought this a few years ago for like the Barnes & Noble half off at the beginning of the year, and honestly this got put on my TBR because it is a mermaid retelling, but it has basis in Yoruba folklore and mythology, which is definitely up my alley. I know here the mermaids are tasked with basically collecting the souls of those who die in shipwrecks, but one day she actually ends up saving a boy instead, and it has far wider repercussions than either of them are expecting. But of course there's also a bit of a romance going on there. Like I said, I knew retelling and folklore, so those 2 things together make this sound perfectly up my alley. I've also heard this has beautiful writing as well. So many buzzwords for me here that fingers crossed this will be 5 stars. Probably the one that I have the most faith in because I adore everything this author writes. The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. This one, as I understand, is set in a world where there are superheroes, and we're following a main character who's in love with one of these superheroes, so much so that he writes self-insert fan fiction about them. Finally getting to meet this hero, that's all I really want to know. I think the fan fiction element of the story is going to be so much fun here. The premise also sort of reminds me of this online comic I read a few years ago called Sub-Zero that unfortunately got abandoned, so hopefully this will kind of give me the same thing I was getting there and actually satisfy the story. This is the first in a trilogy. Here's hoping that I do adore it and that I will be able to blast through the rest of the series. Those are the 3 books we're going to be reading. Here's hoping that all are 5 stars, and I will talk to y'all again when I've officially started into one of them. Hey guys, so I officially hit the halfway point into The Dark Tide by Alicia Jasinska. I learned how to pronounce her name. First and foremost, I love that the basis for the holiday this village is celebrating from a real world cultural basis. St. Walpurgis Eve. I definitely just mispronounced that. But I love the fantastical twist that is done on it by having it be the night that the witch picks a boy that she will try and fall in love with and then sacrifice to the dark tide. Also turns out that this book has some basis in Scottish folklore. Apparently this is sort of a loose queer retelling of Tamlin. I wasn't expecting sibling relationships, though sort of fraught ones, to be as at the forefront of this book either, but I do like the arguments that are coming up because of it, especially with one of our main characters, Lena. She keeps calling out her brother brother and all the double standards he is putting her in by him putting himself into danger and then utilizing the excuse that he's trying to rescue her, but also criticizing her for putting herself in danger and trying to rescue him. They in particular seem to have a kind of complicated relationship. Anyway, on the opposite side, we also have our witch character, 𝗖cie, and she had a sister who died the prior year. She was the prior witch queen who apparently actually fell in love enough with last year's sacrifice that she ended up sacrificing herself. And 𝗖cie is still struggling with the grief she has for her sister. She's hurt, she's still very much unsure of her role as the leader, and when she is given the opportunity, maybe not so much take revenge, but punish this boy for his part, she hops on it. The magic system in this is also very funky. It is really based in the witch's body, I guess I'll say. They'll utilize their spit or their hair in order to utilize their magic, but they also will use parts of things that they get from the sea. So it's funky. I would like a little bit more explanation of that because I'm not really sure I understand how it works, but it's an interesting idea, I will admit. There's also the fact that this island is sinking to the dark tide and, you know, they offer a human sacrifice in order to stop it. So, you know, pretty dark, but it does still have a bit of a fairy tale feel with it. The writing itself flows very easily, and I am reading this really fast. I don't think it's nearly as lyrical as some reviews made me believe, but I can see that it does have an atmospheric writing style because of the, you know, folklore basis. I do want a little bit more from it though in that regard. Pacing is also sort of wonky. The first half of this book, like I read in mostly a single sitting because it's just so quick, but like, I guess let's say the first 120 pages of this all happen in a single night. But then there's a chapter break and like 2 weeks have passed, so that was really weird. I do really like watching Lena and 𝗖cie interact in this. They're very similar, they're both very strong-headed women. Lena is really sassy, whereas 𝗖cie is more dry and sarcastic. But at the same time, their personalities are just so different. Lena is a romantic, and that is what drives a lot of what's gone on in this plot. 𝗖cie does not understand it. She does not get Lena's feelings towards Thomas. She didn't understand her sister's feelings towards Thomas. Even though Lena is constantly trying to be so positive, trying to, you know, push this romantic notion, 𝗖cie will constantly be pointing out the errors in her thinking. But what I do like from it is she's not cruel about it, but she's honest. I mean, what she's saying is true. However, she is sort of utilizing it to play with Lena's emotions. Thomas may have feelings for Lena, but they're definitely not nearly as deep as Lena's are, and he is nowhere near as strong-willed as Lena is. I definitely feel like Lena and 𝗖cie's interactions are very much like stereotypical extrovert and stereotypical introvert being forced to hang out with each other. But I do like the little nuances we are seeing from the characters. Like, I'm reading this super fast. I just don't know if it's gonna have quite the amount of depth I'm really wanting because I'm already halfway in. Like, I can see where things are leading up to, but I just don't know if it's gonna have enough there for me to really be super invested in that. Right now, I don't know if I would necessarily call this a 5-star, but I could see it being a 4-star. Hey guys, so I officially finished out The Dark Tide by alicia jasinska, and I liked this, but unfortunately it was not a 5-star. By the end of the book, I do feel like it was kind of just underdeveloped in multiple different sense. For one, the magic system, I still never really had a solid hold, nor the world. I think both of those were very soft, and the author probably could have helped herself if she had a more established world build and a more established magic system. I also feel like I had a bit of skewed expectations when it came to the relationship, seeing as how I was thinking this would be a bit more romance forward, but it's really not. In actuality, I wouldn't even really constitute this as like a fantasy romance. It is a fantasy book that happens to have relationships tied into the central plot, but romance is kind of a stretch. I mean, it is very slow burn seeing things develop between Lena and 𝗖cie. Though I liked what I was seeing there, I wanted more from it. I wanted to actually be convinced by these two having feelings for one another. And I was kind of convinced on one side, but not the other. So it's more like, I believe this person has a crush. I don't know if I think that they're gonna become a couple as the story continues afterwards. I also think the writing in the latter half was really wonky as we're starting to gear up towards the climax and there's all this action happening. For one, I completely predicted exactly where the story was going to go, but something that was really weird to me is the action I was anticipating doesn't happen on page. Rather, the author builds right up to it and then the chapter changes and there's a time skip with Lena recounting events to us. We don't actually see them take place, which is just really weird in my opinion. I just don't like it when authors do that. It feels so anticlimactic. There's all this lead up only for nothing to really happen for us to enjoy. It's just told to us after the fact. Really, most of my complaints with this book kind of stem from the fact that it is a shorter YA fantasy, so I think if it had been built out a bit more and possibly aged up, I would have liked it even more. But with what this is, I think this is a good introduction to fantasy for younger readers, particularly if they're queer. I definitely think this could be a good representation of that, especially since same-sex relationships are normalized in this, but I also wish there was more of that too. Unfortunately, not a 5-star, but I did like this in the end. It came out to about 3.5 on my compile breakdown. I do still love this cover and the idea of the book, so if there's anything sort of similar to this that you can think of, please give me recommendations for it. Hey y'all, so I've hit the halfway point into Skin of the Sea, and I don't think it's gonna be the 5-star I was hoping for. But one of the reasons I did have that prediction was because I heard the writing in this was absolutely beautiful, and I must concur, it is gorgeous. It fits very well with the like nautical fairy tale aesthetic of the story. It certainly helps to create that whimsical atmosphere to reinforce the fact that this is a fairy tale retelling, which speaking of, I love that the author has slid in little mentions, little references to different things from the original Hans Christian Andersen version of Little Mermaid, while at the same time there's some historical influence from the Atlantic slave trade and then also Yoruba mythology. As far as the ties to Yoruba go, I have seen from a few different reviews that there's some inconsistencies and inaccuracies in the Yoruba that's actually showcased in the story itself, as well as the villainization of one of the Orishas for the bad guy here. I don't personally feel well informed enough about that information to go into specifics, so I'll put a link to a few reviews in the comments down below if you're intrigued. However, I do think having the Yoruba tie-ins do add to the majestic feeling of it. Plus, it's super cool seeing some of these Orisha actually in action, as well as learning more about each of the ones that are introduced and their role in this pantheon of deities, because there are a lot of them. Unfortunately, where this is falling down for me is in plot and characters. So our main character, 𝗖cie, is fine. I just don't really feel like she has a lot of personality, meaning it's been really difficult to connect with her. She is starting to remember more of her life as a human in little flashbacks throughout the book, which does allow me to empathize with her more, but I'm still just having a difficult time connecting with her because there's so little personality there. But I still feel like there's this distance from her that I haven't managed to cross. Kola, the boy she ends up saving, I actually feel like he has more personality. He jumps off the page more for me. Everything we've learned about him makes perfect sense for the character that we've seen. He just seems more well established. I understand him a lot better. Then as far as a romance goes between these two, I don't really feel any chemistry. I don't feel much of anything there. I can see the tiny little bits of it, but I am appreciative that there hasn't been more focus on the romance just yet. On the opposite side, the other thing, like I mentioned, is the plot. It's fine. It honestly feels like your typical quest story for a YA fantasy book, but with, you know, like Little Mermaid and Yoruba mythology mixed in. However, I don't really follow what's like the driving force of the characters or of why they're going on this quest. What's the real importance of it apart from stopping 𝗖cie from becoming more powerful? Which, as far as like motivations for a villain go, pretty basic, pretty underwhelming. Really, I'm intrigued enough to keep reading, but I don't know if I would continue the series with how this book's really going. I mean, it's only a duology and these books are pretty short, but still, it's really gonna depend on how things go in the latter half of this one. Hey y'all, so I have finished out Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen, and unfortunately this was not the 5-star I was predicting. Midway update Nat was correct about that,
But I do think that things got better for this book in the latter half. I'm glad I didn't DNF it because I actually really liked certain elements of the story. First off, the writing continued to be really beautiful. It is very transportive. It perfectly matches with the aesthetic of the story on the whole. Bowen even slid in some beings from Middle and Western African folklore. I thought that was very cool. For example, there were the Singalese fairies. There was I don't remember the actual term for them, but the hyena, which I believe came from Ghana. That was really interesting, and I liked learning about those. I also think that as far as the plot went, this improved in the second half. I did become more invested into the quest the more we saw of it, the further in we got, especially once the characters started to face some really dire consequences. Yeah, I was like right there with them on the edge of my seat, desperate to see what was going to happen next. How were they going to get out of this situation? Sam? On top of that, I actually really like how this book ended. Unfortunately, I never was really won over by the romance. It was there. I think because I wasn't ever completely convinced by 𝗖cie as a character, so I didn't really feel any chemistry between she and 𝗁. I did like 𝗁. I thought he was really cool, and the more we saw of his life, I liked him more and more. Again, I just felt like 𝗖cie had so little personality come through. It's such a shame. I never felt like 𝗖cie was taking these actions because she loved 𝗁. If anything, I think it was more just she was a good person who realized the error of her ways and was willing to sacrifice herself in order for things to be set right. And so that's why she's constantly putting herself into danger. By extension, she also puts herself into danger to protect 𝗁 because that's the right thing to do in her opinion. He wouldn't be involved in this situation if she didn't save him in the first place. The ending of this is interesting because I personally really liked it, but it's sort of done in a way to act as a cliffhanger. It makes sense that there's a sequel book, but as far as a Little Mermaid retelling goes, especially the original Hans Christian Andersen version, I really liked this ending for the book. It's really hard to talk about it without spoilers. I think it just kind of came full circle in a really clever and well-handled way. Unfortunately, because of that, I feel no drive to pick up the next book. I have no interest in it, honestly. I think this was good enough as a Little Mermaid retelling, but it wasn't 5 stars. And I'm bummed. Hey guys, so I've hit the halfway point into The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune, and if I'm being completely honest, this is probably the one that I had the highest expectations of because TJ Klune is responsible for many books that are my happy place or have emotionally wrecked me. And with this one so far, I am really enjoying it. I love that this very much leans into the silly campiness of superheroes. I mean, it is definitely reminiscent to old school comics, and I adore it. It is over the top when it comes to the teenage humor, which also fits perfectly with a YA story. And Nick, the main character, bounces around between so many different subjects and so many different thoughts at any point in time. It can be a little jarring, especially if you're not used to it or if you're not paying attention. I wouldn't be surprised you lose the original plot. For me, I'm really liking it. I think it works perfectly with the fact that Nick is ADHD. That is how his brain works. So the writing itself actually feels like you are in Nick's brain. And because of that, he goes on some very interesting spirals of thought. Part of the entire book hinges on the fact that Nick is unobservant. He is unaware. And at times, I can see it being frustrating, especially because you as the reader can put 2 and 2 together. Everybody in Nick's life, they've figured this out and are just waiting for him to finally do it. And it's as though everybody had a meeting to say, nobody can point this out to him. Nobody say a word. He needs to figure it out himself. Even though it can be a little irritating, again, it does fit perfectly with Nick's character. Just the personality he has and everything Klune has showcased about him. Nick is funny, he's sweet, he's a little overdramatic. I really enjoy seeing his interactions with his friend group because every single person in the group kind of plays off of different parts of his personality, which makes for these fantastic dynamics. And as a whole, I really enjoy seeing them. I was officially starting to hit the point just shy of halfway where I wanted to bang my head into a wall because, come on, buddy. Especially at the last chapter I read, just so much evidence that is plain as day there so that he could connect the dots and finally figure this out, but he still hasn't. And yet I really love that Klune perfectly paced it to know you were hitting that point, and has a character just drop some information and it totally shifts Nick's perspective. And I can't wait to read the next chapter and see how he handles this realization. The tone itself is also very interesting because it is really silly, it is really fun a lot of the time, but then there are these very somber moments. Nick's mom passed not too long ago. Unfortunately, she was present during a bank robbery, but he also is struggling with his ADHD and how it impacts the relationships he has in his life, as well as just impacts his self-esteem. Even when it comes to the extraordinaries, sometimes it's very lighthearted, it's very fun, because, you know, they're superheroes. But then there will be these little moments that ground it, bring it back down to the real world and real world expectations, real world consequences, some of the more serious thought processes that are necessary when you have superheroes, and these societal struggles that also come about because there are superheroes. Nick still thinks of the world in very black and white, and I like that Klune is already laying the groundwork to showcase the little bits of gray that are going to upset Nick's current view and hopefully allow him to grow and realize the real implications of his wanting to become an extraordinary, obsession with these heroes, and the fact that, you know, they're not perfect. Like, they still are technically human. I mean, this isn't X-Men, so, you know, they're not mutants. They're still fallible. I really cannot wait to see how Klune handles that progression in Nick's perspective. I'm so excited. I'm really liking this. Again, it's a silly, fun time, but I'm very impressed that even though a lot of the book feels immature, there's some really mature themes going on. Hey guys, so I finished out The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune, and I really liked this. I still think Klune's writing around Nick's neurodiversity is so well done. It fits perfectly with the writing style of the story itself. I actually really enjoyed how we see a little bit of growth from Nick when it comes to his experience with it and how he's handling it. He's still learning how to live with this diagnosis, and it's clear that his father is kind of still trying to do the same. You also see, and multiple people in Nick's life call him out on it, that he also uses it as a crutch at times. And so that's why I really liked seeing the growth from him. There's also this really fantastic reveal right at the end of the book that kind of goes hand in hand with his ADHD, but not quite. I mentioned in my first update that a lot of the plot kind of relies on the fact that Nick is unobservant, and you, the reader, can put things together, especially if you've literally experienced any other superhero story. You can figure out what's going on. But Nick, even though it's right in front of his face, can't put two and two together. However, I was really impressed at what Klune did with that in regard to the writing of that entire reveal throughout the whole book was so good. He handled that situation in the most clever way. I thought I knew what was going on. Nick didn't, but I thought I had put it all together. And he still managed to surprise me. I really liked that. I mean, this book does have a lot of similarities to many other superhero stories out there, but I also really enjoyed it because it's so distinctly new in Nick's character. There's many places where you can see that Klune drew inspiration from, but Nick himself is pretty original, and I really like the setup of it with the fan fiction element as well. I thought that was very entertaining, especially for anybody who's involved in fandom culture of superheroes. I also really liked the twists and turns that took place in this when it came to the underlying theme of Nick realizing there's gray in this world, and I'm really excited to see how Klune continues to weave that into the story. There was a lot that happened at the end of this book that has me so excited for the next installment. I already went and got it from the library. I can't freaking wait. This technically was like a 4-star on my Copilot, if I'm being honest. There's stuff in it I can critique, but I just had such a fantastic time along the way that I don't even really care. So 5 stars. Thankfully, I at least had 1 5-star in this video. On that note, thank you so much for coming to my channel today, guys. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a superhero emoji in the comments. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!